what is the deal with red light? Why is red light such a big deal? Well, more than 50% of our sun's rays are made up of red and infrared light. And that is what we're going to be talking about today with my guest, Scott Kennedy. And first, I just want to say that it's really important that we think about the importance of red and infrared light, because I saw these panels and I was like, what's the big deal with these things? Like, this feels like such a hoax. Like, I did not buy in. But then I learned, okay, over 50% of the sun's rays are red and infrared. Our windows are now blocking out a huge amount of the infrared, almost all of it. Our light bulbs have all the infrared taken out of it because they're energy efficient. And we are really devoid of this light in our environment. And this light is a nutrient. And that's what one of the things that I'm learning about lately is that light is also another nutrient. And there are absolutely incredible benefits to our metabolic health getting this red light. So if you want to get it for free, go outside, be outside. If you can be outside all the time, you do not need these devices. However, so many of us are inside so much of the time because we work, because we have to get things done, because we have to take care of kids, because it's crappy out, right? So I can't be outside as much as I want, even though I work from home, because sometimes it's horrible outside, right? So we're not getting all these benefits. And then we're in these modern lifestyles, and there's EMFs, there's inflammatory things, there's toxins. And this isn't to scare you. This is just to say that using the sun or these red light therapy panels are game changing for our health, because they're helping to replace what we have lost by living indoors. Because I will say, as much as, I might not want to buy a red light device, or I could be more healthy if I lived outside, I like the comforts of my home. I don't want to live outside. So these panels are an amazing way to sort of blend or bring more nature back in, because we have lost so much of it. So I'm really excited to bring Scott Kennedy on today. He has such a wealth of knowledge in this area, and you're going to learn all about these red light panels, about the devices, and what to look for, and common things that we might want to look out for when shopping for these devices. So I'm going to read Scott's bio. Scott Kennedy is a certified laser light specialist. He has a really cool story, and health coach. In 2018, he started the first light therapy wellness center in New Jersey, where he meets with clients from all walks of life. He started his journey 10 years ago, where he suffered from peripheral neuropathy. He saw countless doctors and tried countless remedies with only limited relief. He went from running ultra marathons to boxing to being sedentary. So within 4 months, his symptoms decreased over 80%. The improvements he felt from light therapy were life-altering. He's now back to running and boxing and living his life. His goal is to now help others get back to doing what they enjoy in life without pain or pills. With a focus on safety and quality, he began LightpathLED to create the best home use panels on the market. They now have panels that surpass the competition at a lower price point, as well as panels with multiple wavelengths and pulsing, which no other company is doing. His commitment is always to the pursuit of optimal health and well-being of his clients and their families. And you can find Scott at LightpathLED online, and I am going to link to all my discount codes in the show notes, and I'm super excited. You're going to be just blown away at what these red light therapy panels can do, who they can help. And I'm going to give you a hint. It is incredible for your blood sugar. It is super, super research based as well. So everything that Scott talks about is very well researched. And so I'm super excited to bring you this interview with Scott Kennedy. Hey, Scott, thanks for being here on the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. Welcome.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we got to connect in person a little bit the other day, and we were a little nerding out on red light and its benefits. And so I'm really excited to get you on, because I also just got a bunch of panels, and I'm getting a lot of questions like, why do we need red light? Aren't LEDs bad for us? So we're going to distill all these myths and talk about all the amazing benefits. But first, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and what brought you to light. What let you see the light?
Okay. So I'll try to condense this as much as I can because it's long. I got my start in the dental field. So I was a dental technician in the military, and then eventually got out, got into doing dental hygiene. Eventually, I started dealing with some physical issues just of that job, wrist, back, neck. So I got into doing trainings, and I started working with a laser company. So this was a laser company that could do, it could cut hard tissue. So instead of having to use a drill, it could cut soft tissue instead of using a scalpel. So it was much more gentler on our tissues. But that same laser that was really high powered, if I put it right here, it would cut a hole right through your cheek. But if I pulled it out and dispersed the energy, so lower energy, not to where it was ablative, but what we saw is really quick healing of people dealing with like TMJ dysfunction. Like they could barely open up to, with just a few minutes on either side, having a pronounced difference. We saw with post extraction. So whether it was dry socket issues or just pain or just longer healing times, we saw that dramatically decreased. So things like periodontal disease as well. But we had a few doctors that thought outside of the box of just the oral cavity, and so if their uh, father had shingles, they would actually bring them to the office and treat that. Or if uh, their kid broke their finger in the door, they would first thing they would do is actually bring them to the dental office, treat them with the laser before they would bring them to the doctor's office. And I just became fascinated with that. So I dug into the research. I dug into those few people out there that my mentors who I learned everything from. But I personally suffered from idiopathic peripheral neuropathy, and that just caused extreme burning in my hands and my feet, and took me completely out of any activity. Like I enjoyed running, I enjoyed boxing, and I couldn't do any of that stuff. Um, so while I had these dental lasers, I was putting them on my feet and my hands, thinking, okay, that's where the problem is my feet and the hands. Uh, and like honestly, I got no success, and I kind of thought to myself, well, I know this isn't BS, but it's probably BS for me. It's just not working for me. And then I started to put LED light on my spine, and within 2 months, I saw a good 85-90% improvement in my neuropathy. I was able to stand for more than 30 seconds. I was actually able to get back to running. I was able to get back to boxing. Uh, so that's what really convinced me. Not to mention, still in my late 30s, early 40s, I had really bad back acne. I went through Accutane and all that junk as a teenager, in my early 20s. It worked good, but the back acne was still there. My partner loved torturing me just every day, could just go like this. And um, after doing light on my back, literally maybe 4 times a year, she can torture me. So you know that wasn't a huge deal with my life, but it was still, it just showed the benefit of how light interacts with the body for all kinds of ways that it can create improvement. So from that point on, I eventually got to a point where I started a wellness center, and then soon after, I started LightpathLED, which is my devices, because a lot of people couldn't get to me to get treatment. So it was nice to have an option of having a device that can be sent right to your home, so people could be using it, in their own comfortable environment. And so that's kind of where I am now. Now it's just a matter of, um, growing, improving on what we do based on, the science and what's best for our customers.
I love that. And what a cool story about seeing the laser, like it transforming people's health. And so it feels kind of crazy that light could make us heal. So can you talk about like what is light? Like how on earth is light that like we see all the time, we take for granted, we turn on a light, like how is this helping? How does that work?
Yeah, so the first study was on a laser in the late 60s. So that's when lasers were invented. And so they thought it would cause cancer. So they did a control group on mice and then irradiated another group. Um, and so they shaved both of them, and they found one no cancer. But what they thought that was really interesting is that uh, the mouse with the laser, the hair grew back significantly faster than the control side. And this was a red. This was a red laser, so this was somewhere like 635 nanometer. Not important. Um, but so they go, oh, that's very interesting. That light had some kind of a biological effect, some kind of a healing or a recovery or a speeding up effect. So they delved in and just continued to do a lot of science on it. NASA got involved in it with their astronauts. And they eventually got to the point where they found that certain wavelengths of light has a healing benefit to our cells. So red, near infrared seem to be the most penetrating, that have the most benefit. That's what you'll generally see in devices. But they're also finding interesting things with blue light, with green light. And so probably the last 20 years is where the research has really dramatically increased, because when you have certain diseases, say like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, other things where, there's no real gold standard, there's no real pill that is being really very effective at all, you tend to see a lot more money shift towards what we would call alternative wellness. And so we're starting to see a lot more studies being done with red, near infrared, pulsed light on the brain, and actually having really positive benefits for certain people that, suffering types of diseases like Alzheimer's, dementia.
Sorry, I had to hit the unmute there. Yeah, it's really cool that there's this new emerging science that it's helpful for that. So maybe it would be helpful to talk about just quickly, like red versus infrared. So what's the difference there? And we know that about half of the sun's rays are, I think a little over half, are red and infrared. So infrared makes up something like 49%. So this concept that there's so much of that coming from the sun at all times, like that's in all latitudes, all year round, that much infrared light is coming from the sun all the time, even when it's cold out, right? That it must be important if it's half of the sun's rays all the time, right?
Yeah. So when we go for the whole spectrum of light, we're down at the one side of gamma, UVC, UVB, up to, we get to the visible light. So that's, starting at violet. Back in high school, Roy B. Give.
Mm-hmm.
So that went through all the colors of our visible spectrum. And then beyond the visible spectrum, we get into near infrared. And then beyond that, we get into mid infrared. And then beyond that, into far infrared. And that's where we get microwave and radio waves and other things like that. When we talk about light therapy, which the technical term is photobiomodulation, but it's a mouthful. So people just stick with red light therapy. It makes sense. That's what you see. That's really part of the near infrared. So that's specific wavelengths of light that don't really have a heating component to it. So when we talk about like far infrared, we're talking, and some in mid, that's where we start getting into saunas, heat lamps, things like that.
Okay.
So what we're doing is not a heating part of it. It's more specific wavelengths of the light in that near infrared that have an effect on our cells to basically, there's a lot more to it, but to produce more energy called ATP.
Okay. So near infrared light and red light, how do they impact the mitochondria?
Right. So everything's with light's got a chromophore. So it's what basically absorbs light. So we know through the studies with mitochondria. Now, good point out, like mitochondria, when we think back to school, we saw this one cell, and you'd have all your little different, your nucleus and different parts, and there would be one mitochondria. We know that as the powerhouse of the cell. when in reality, there's hundreds of thousands of mitochondria per cell. Not only that, but we have free floating mitochondria throughout the bloodstream.
I didn't know
So
that.
yeah, that's what they didn't find out till a little bit more recently. And it actually, because red blood cells is the only cell in the body that does not have a mitochondria.
Yeah.
So studies are showing all of these positive benefits by irradiating the blood. And they're like, well, but why is that happening? We don't quite get it because RBCs don't have mitochondria.
Yeah.
And then they found mitochondria free floating, which
Oh.
that's a cool story on how
Yeah.
mitochondria work. So mitochondria has different components, one of them being copper, and that tends to absorb red light. There's also another part called the interstitial water layer. It's a layer around the mitochondria, around the cell, which can be viscous. And when it's viscous, it doesn't allow micronutrients, calcium ion channels, stuff like that. So when light gets absorbed by that, it tends to open things up in the mitochondria. So there's actually this pump that spins 9,000 times per minute. Uh, and what can
The
happen is
ATPase?
was that?
Is it the ATPase?
Well, the pump is what's making the ATP. So it pulls
Okay.
in oxygen, nitrogen, but sometimes it can get clogged up with um,
With
with NO.
deuterium? Oh,
Yeah, well, yes, with that as well, but nitric oxide mainly.
okay.
So nitric oxide is normally wonderful, wonderful protein, wonderful signaling molecule. Um, but so what light will does is it helps knock that nitric oxide off, so that the pump can spin quicker, and that's releasing more ATP for the body, which is 90% of what the body uses for its daily energy.
So, red light is supportive of our mitochondria, which we have hundreds and thousands in all of our cells. There's different amounts in different tissues and organs, and it helps the mitochondria make more ATP, which is an energy source of our body, and it also helps us make more EZ water, which is that exclusion zone water, which is like our body's battery. So it helps with cellular hydration. It also helps to the more easy water we have, the more it prevents that heavy hydrogen deuterium from clogging up those little nanomotors. And so that is important there. And so, yeah, so that's kind of what's happening on a microscopic level or below microscopic. So what about other benefits? There's so many benefits. We hear you've already listed some of them in the stories that you were talking about. What are some other benefits? And maybe we talked about off air. Maybe we want to go like head to toe to keep ourselves organized because there are just so many like systemic versus local benefits of this as well. So however you feel like chatting about it, I'd love to hear the benefits of the red light therapy.
Yeah. And one thing I try to avoid, because we don't want to get caught up in this, hey, red light does all these things, when it really doesn't. It's not going to cure this. It's not going to heal this. It's not going to do this. What it does is simply it activates the body to do what the body should be doing. All right. From there,
Mm,
it's a downstream of benefit. So whether light's increasing ATP, the short like the quick short benefits of light, it's increasing blood flow, it's increasing lymphatic flow, it's increasing oxygen, it's decreasing edema. So that's where with nitric oxide being released, that's with brief reactive oxygen species, which through acutely is actually extremely beneficial for us. Then you have the second stage, which is more the protection. So that's it decreases cell death, and so it's anti-apoptotic, decreases toxicity, increases antioxidants, decreases inflammation, and then you get the final stage. It's kind of like the repair. That's angiogenesis. So it's actually creating new blood capillaries, neurogenesis. So new neurons, synaptogenesis, synapsis, neurotrophins. So when we start looking at all these things that light can just start the process on, we start to understand, all right, why does it work for simply inflammation? We know why. but why is it working for deeper things like Alzheimer's? Why is it beneficial for people that are diabetic, people that are dealing with circadian rhythm type issues? Why is it for people with hypothyroidism or low testosterone or infertility issues, or increasing our performance of exercise? So so it's important to say, hey, here's why it's doing all these things. It's not doing that, don't just get a light and go, hey, it's going to work on all these things. Again, it's just working on at a cellular level to really kickstart what the body's supposed to be doing. And the downstream, what we call the systemic benefits are hugely important. So if I'm putting light on my stomach and I'm increasing positive gut microbiome, that actually helps to reduce depression, anxiety type issues. Um, if I'm putting the light on long bones, shin bones, breastbone, that's actually increasing stem cell differentiation in the brain. If I'm putting light on the thyroid, all the benefits that has. So it's like, yeah, we can certainly run top down, but it's important for people to understand why it's actually doing what it's doing.
Right. So I'm understanding what you're saying, and I want to bring in this concept that maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of this comes down to, like we already talked about, how the mitochondria are making energy, right? And so when we think about energy, there's the way that we typically think about it, which is like, oh, I have enough energy, or I don't have enough energy, I need more coffee, right? Like, so I feel energized today, or I don't. But then there's this other type of energy, and that's the fact that, like, all of our cells, all of our organs, all of these systems need that cellular energy to be able to do all of their functions, like apoptosis and mitophagy and like repair processes. Like, there's hundreds and thousands of processes that all of our mitochondria and all of our cells need to be doing all the time. And so if the liver doesn't have enough energy to do what the liver needs to do, it's going to, detox is going to fall short and all these things. So it's almost like it's supporting each cell to be a better cell. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's no different than when we eat food. We're breaking it down into proteins, polysaccharides, fats. Those get broken down even more into
Electron.
glucose,
Mhm.
uh, and then what feeds the cells are the glucose. ATP isn't made without glucose.
Mhm.
So no different than how we feed our bodies is really exactly how um, the cells take that in, and it's really the same process. It's just we're going a little bit deeper.
Mhm. Okay, cool. So, what are some of these other benefits? You listed several already, but what are some notable ones, and especially that you're seeing in the research? Because I know you're very research based with all of this, and some people are like, "Well, where's the research?" So,
Oh
I
yeah,
know that there's tons of it. So, yeah.
yeah. That's a really good thing. I'm basing everything that I do on the research, and there's well over 7,000 studies that have been done on light. So way more than any medication out there. And that's a good thing is anything we talk about, I can go and point to this research, whether it's done on
Mhm.
a study on mice, a study on rats, a study on humans, a study um, in vitro, in a petri dish. So we have so much study on red light therapy. So that's what makes it makes it easy for me to discuss, because I can say, I'm not the scientist. I'm just going to go through and read it and try to
Mhm.
understand it, and then try to uh, put it in a manner that people can understand better. So really good studies recently with people dealing with diabetes. Um, so a recent study showed that following glucose intake, that light can help decrease the spike by about 10%. It can reduce the glucose curve by about 27%. And just like you're talking about the liver, same with the pancreas. So we go, okay, well, why is this happening? So when we have light on the body and we create nitric oxide, we help to shift our body from that fight or flight sympathetic to the parasympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Insulin is produced by the pancreas when it's in the parasympathetic. So if we're in that constant fight or flight, chronic sympathetic, our bodies just don't heal. They don't
Mm.
work properly.
Yeah.
So that's
It's going to be creating a lot of glucose in that state.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So also with more ATP production, we're going to see an increase in anti-inflammatory markers. So inflammation, that's basically at the root of disease, disorders, dysfunction. So if the pancreas has too much inflammation, if the cells around them have too much inflammation, nothing's going to work properly. And then also as we're feeding the cells with more ATP, one of the big eaters is going to be our central nervous system, our autonomic nervous system. So those are hugely involved in insulin signaling, so glucose metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
So we start to understand, okay, here's the research that showed benefit. Now we got to go, why is that? And we can go, here's reason one, here's reason two, here's reason three, and there's probably more other nuance than I'm going over, but you start putting the dots together and figuring out why this works. Why even just light on the forehead helps with people with diabetes. Why? Because so much of our nerves, our signaling is occurring right in here.
Wow.
So in this, and the one study that I just talked about, they actually put light on the back. So they put it at a distance, and it was only red light for about 15 minutes, and they did that 45 minutes prior to the patient's ingesting glucose. Just think, if we're putting that on the rest of the body, how much of an increased benefit that's going to have to people. And there's tons of other research on mice and rats as well, showing that there's an increase of insulin resistance. Decrease of insulin resistance.
Mm-hmm.
So the cells are actually able to take the glucose in better. The pancreas is able to produce more insulin as well. So there's no, we've got medications out there for people dealing with diabetes, but again, we're not getting at a lot of the root causes of that.
Yeah, and a lot of diabetes is mitochondrial dysfunction as well. There's always
Mhm.
mitochondrial dysfunction, and so you're supporting the mitochondria up to actually utilize glucose more efficiently when you have red light on the body, whether from the sun or from these panels. And so it's that's how it effectively lowers those blood sugar spikes. So that's really awesome. I always tell people, eat outside, but if sometimes you can't get outside. Sometimes you're in an office. Like I have my little panel right here. You can use this on your stomach as you're eating. You can, if you can't get outside, if it's raining, if it's snowing, if there's a tornado, you can. That's where these devices come in, where you can utilize them as well. So that's really, really cool.
And then we can even take a step and say, well, let's just shine light on the testicles. Um, you know, for men dealing with low sperm,
Hmm.
erectile dysfunction. We talk about women who have been infertile for years, and just putting light on points around the neck,
Hmm.
having a 26% increase in being able to get pregnant. Teenagers dealing with menstrual cramping, that are popping all kinds of pills for those few days, being basically bedridden for those 3, 4, 5 days. Uh, so there's lots of things that light is really showing can be huge benefits for people. And again, brain health,
Mm-hmm.
Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. How light, although it may not get to the SCN, which is that deep part of the brain, that just light, getting 3% of light can get through the skull to the brain. So you go, well, how does that affect something so deep? Okay, so that's where we go with nitric oxide release. So it's getting into the bloodstream. We've got bone, we got stem cell production, we got reactive oxygen species. So now all of a sudden we're getting oxygen and blood flow to the brain. We're getting a reduction in toxicities, particularly when we put it on the glymph in the back of the neck area.
Mm.
We're getting signaling. So cells are starting to talk to each other. When we talked about mitochondria, um, when it's energized, will actually leave a healthy cell, go to a damaged cell, connect with ill functioning mitochondria, and in essence, feed them to bring them back up to life. So same thing as when we've got mitochondria free floating in our blood system. I can literally put light on the wrist area, and we've seen improvements in brain health. And you go, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's the wrist. Well, yeah, we're getting the blood supply, and that blood
Mm.
supply is traveling through the body into the brain. So it's amazing what they're finding out when we start, kind of separating localized. Yeah, we can talk about, hey,
Yeah.
I've got a sore knee. Let's put light on the knee.
Yeah.
But when we start putting it on other parts of the body and get benefits way beyond that, that's when it gets really, really fascinating.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, this idea that we can get these local benefits on specific organs, but there's always, it seems, a systemic benefit that you're getting because the body is connected, because it's targeting the blood and, and lymphatic system. So, there's always systemic benefits as well as those localized areas. So, one of the questions that a lot of people have when it comes to red light therapy is like, how big of a device do I need? Like this, I have the mini, the LightPath LED mini. And so they're like, well, is that enough? So how would you answer that?
Yeah. So a lot of it is just comes down to time, budget,
Mm-hmm.
your environment. Where do you live? Do you travel a lot? So all of these things are like the big panel in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
That makes life easy because I
Mm-hmm.
can just sit or I can stand in front of it. I disrobe and I can get my entire body in a short amount of time. So you would think with your smaller device, well, that's going to take me hours because I can't just move it over. I mean, it would take
Yeah.
literally hours. But again, we talked about the systemic part of things.
Mm-hmm.
So what if I'm just irradiating the thyroid? I'm also getting the blood supply. I'm also getting a lot of the lymph vessels in the neck. What if I'm doing the back of the neck, the forehead, the armpits? Um, if I'm doing the breastbone, if I'm doing the stomach. So I can focus that light on more localized areas that create a very systemic effect. Now, there's more a little bit more knowledge based in doing that. Is a little bit more time involved in doing it. Um, but you can certainly create a systemic benefit with a smaller device. So you don't have to go out and spend the big money on a big panel. That it does make your life easy. I mean, in the morning, I love to be able to sit in front of my light. I've got my blue, red, near infrared. I pulse it. I can do my breath work. And then after 15, 20 minutes, I'm good for the day.
Mm-hmm.
That's uh, that's easier for me to than taking a small unit and
Mm-hmm.
moving it around the
Mm-hmm.
body. So everyone's different. If you travel a lot, you can't take one of these big devices with you.
This is amazing. I'm going to say I took this with me when I went to Florida. You you can also use it as a room light, which is great. So I turned it on the red only setting, and then I had really good circadian appropriate lighting for my trip, but also it's, using it after travel. I got a bunch of mosquito bites and I put it on those and it helped. And I have been using this one honestly nonstop. I'll put it in my waistbands to get it on over my stomach and over my pelvis, like the, ovaries, and then on over my liver. And I've been putting it on my thyroid, or if I'm sitting on the couch, I'll just stick it behind my head. And since is this one is you charge it and it doesn't plug into the wall like a wall socket. You're able to put it against your body, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, cool.
And even when we talk about EMFs, they're so minute. Like that big panel behind me has 6 inches, it's zero. And you're going to generally position yourself about 12 inches away. But that's more because we want to be able to get the whole body, and it's kind of tough to just stick that right to myself.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
with light therapy, we really don't have to worry about EMF, although, that was a little bit of a marketing thing for some initial panels on the market to say, hey, we're low EMF. So people started to say, oh, I've got to be concerned. When in all
Uh,
actuality, you pick up your hair dryer, your
this
phone, your
phone is,
Bluetooth. Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not even maybe for those rare people that have just hyper sensitive
Hmm.
to EMF, they know because they've got their measurer and they're measuring everything
Hmm.
around them. Um, but even like a good example is light. Morning light is amazing for us. Morning light has very little of any UV. That's our protection for the harsher UV rays in the afternoon.
Yep.
Morning sun actually gives us protection, makes your cells more resistant to damaging effects of UV.
Hmm.
Red light therapy does the exact same thing. So before I'd go out to the beach, I'm going to do my light, and I can easily go a couple hours before I feel any need to put on any kind of a mineral sunscreen, if any at all.
Hmm.
And then it can help the after effects if you do have a little bit of pink, a little bit of inflammation there. It can certainly decrease those issues. Same
Yeah.
thing with EMF.
Hmm.
So light therapy is actually making the cells more resistant to EMFs, no different than it does to some of the damaging effects of sunlight.
Oh, amazing. That's really good because I feel like we're just being so inundated, but that's really helpful to
Mm-hmm.
know. And I know that red light therapy is really helpful for r- like supporting sun damage. So if you have some sun damaged skin, I met someone, she was a woman who is in her 60s, and she started really getting into this circadian quantum biology. She's outside all the time, and she's doing full spectrum sunlight, so morning, noon, evening sun. So she's getting the full thing. And she's like, one of the things I noticed is that all my sunspots went away. And I was like, that is so weird. Like, usually I don't see
Mm-hmm.
someone as tan as her who's her age, who doesn't have these sunspots. And it's this idea of like, when we get the full spectrum light, and then if, these red light therapy panels are there to supplement when you can't be outside all the time, you're getting a higher dose, you're getting like, if it's rainy out, like you can still get these things. And so our modern society calls for modern solutions sometimes, but this idea that getting all that red light can help mitigate the damage from the sun, because we need that UV light. We need it to make vitamin D, which is essential for optimal blood sugar, insulin sensitivity, immune system, so many things. So this is an amazing tool to really support the healing piece of it. So looking at these red lights is very healing. And just our modern society is so devoid of this red light because everything's been pushed towards energy efficiency. And when they make things energy efficient, they take out the infrared. So our windows block infrared. They actually block some of the red. They make it more blue. They took the infrared out of our light bulbs. We used to have incandescent light bulbs, and now we have LED light bulbs. And an LED light bulb is different than than these panels, right? Because the LED light bulb has like a strong blue, but it doesn't have the red and infrared. So we're not talking about the same thing. It's not like all LED, everything is bad. These are the healing kinds, right?
Yeah, and the biggest issue with the new household bulbs is, and blue is great for us. I
Yeah.
mean the
At the right time, right? With the
correct.
right, yeah.
So this is one of the things we get into where people get fearful of certain things because they hear something. They hear, "Oh, blue is bad." Yeah, because we're on the computer screen for hours in a day. We've got our lights on in our house at 10 o'clock at night, right before we're ready to go to bed. So we're getting all this blue light, and our body sees that as sunlight, and it says, "Okay, we don't need to be producing melatonin right now."
Mhm.
All right, because we're in the daytime.
Yeah.
So you have difficulty with sleep. You have
Mhm.
difficulty with circadian rhythm. If you
Mhm.
don't have good, healthy sleep, your entire body's going to fall apart.
Mhm.
All right. So that's where, otherwise, blue is amazingly beneficial for us. But like everything is kind of in moderation. But sunlight isn't meant to give us, that strong of blue, particularly without the other wavelength. So we also say, wavelengths have a very synergistic effect. So interesting,
Mm.
like red will go deeper in the body when near infrared is pulling it. So we know that they work
Ah.
better together than separate, which makes absolute sense because of sunlight. So the same thing is, you know, blue with red near infrared, blue with other wavelengths is more beneficial than just
Blue
by
red.
itself. But if
Mm,
we're
yeah.
taking away a lot of those beneficial wavelengths and we're just, doing blue 12 hours a day and we're stuck inside all day long, it's not difficult to see why we're having so many health issues.
Yeah. So you have blue in some of your panels. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
So the interesting with blue is we've known blue is good for skin health. It's
Mhm.
certainly good for skin issues, eczema, psoriasis. Very good for acne. For that reason, is because it creates excessive reactive oxygen species, which can actually kill the acne-causing bacteria.
Okay.
But it's really beneficial for circadian rhythm. So we know blue, particularly blue when it's pulsed. So that the on and off of it. They've done a number of studies with increasing circadian rhythm, improving it, reducing effects of cognitive decline, such as Alzheimer's. Uh, so they knew that it was beneficial, but they didn't quite know why. And recently they found chromophores, kind of like when we talk about mitochondria with red and infrared. With blue, it's flavins, it's opsins, and those are proteins that absorb the light, and then through that process help to feed the cells and feed the mitochondria. Um, and so, no different than sunlight in the morning, blue is what that's going to do is help the body suppress melatonin, and once we suppress that melatonin, then that starts to help to um, start our circadian rhythm over again. So it balances things out. So that's why, like in the morning, I always have on. I'm in the northern climate, so it's cold. 11 and a half months out of the year. So I enjoy having my blue, red, near infrared on at the same time, and I pulse it at 40. And that's
Mhm.
great for me. Now in the evening, I'm just going to do. If I'm going to do evening, I'm just going to do red and near infrared. I'm not going to do the blue because I don't want melatonin suppression at that time. And so they're finding other
Yeah.
things with blue benefits to hair. So people dealing with hair loss issues, photoreceptors in the hair follicles that absorb blue. They're actually finding blue light through the eyes is kind of kickstarting stem cells that help hair follicles as well. So
Wow.
it's very interesting, all the new information, and a lot of times they find, okay, we know it's working, but then it takes a little bit of while to figure out exactly why it's going. So that was one of the interesting things with
Yeah.
blue, and green has a similar effect, not quite to what blue does, but they both have a similar effect on certain proteins in the body that then just help to feed the cells and increase ATP production.
Interesting. So, can you explain the difference between pulsing light? Because you said that there's benefits to pulsed light, but then we
Mhm.
hear about flicker. And so, can
Yeah.
you explain the difference for people who have heard these terms but don't know how to make sense of them?
Yeah. So uh, uh, pulse light is the on and off, but it's very specific, meaning we have a duty cycle. Like it's on for 20% of a second, or 50% of a second, or 80%. And so we know exactly how much light is on for per second, and we know how many times it's going to be flashing per
So,
second.
it's at a
So
regular rate.
it's very regular,
Yes.
which is what the body likes, because the body works that way. The body
Yeah.
isn't sporadic with its pulsing. So when we talk about brain wavelengths, we hear theta, delta, alpha, gamma. And what they're finding is like 40 hertz visually um, helps to bring brain wavelengths up to
Okay.
more of that gamma, where that's more of our alert, active, where lower pulse can help bring us down to more of that quieter, calmer brain wavelengths. And they know that not just through red light therapy, just light in general. So you could take a white light um, and have it pulsed at 40, and they're having benefits no different than uh, 40 sound. Auditory is helping with brain functions as well.
Cool.
When we talk about flicker, when you go into like an old warehouse and you see the lights up there, and you can see them kind of flicker, they're very kind of sporadic. The body just doesn't tend to like that. Again, it doesn't, body likes something that's very structured, very
Rhythmic.
systematic. Right,
Hmm.
right.
Yeah. Okay. So, the difference in essentially is that pulsing is very rhythmic and flicker is random, sporadic, and that is stressful
Mm-hmm.
for the body as opposed to something that's regular and predictable.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
brain, the neurons create rhythmic oscillations. So that's how
Hmm.
they interacted through the different quadrants of the brain. So again, that just goes to show they like things to be very specific. They don't want something erratic. That's certainly gonna be harmful to us.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. So, where can people learn more about light, get these devices if they want? And oh, actually, before that, you have a torch. I have the torch. What can you use this torch for? Can you explain that for us? Because I think that it's a different, it's got all these add-ons. So where can you use this torch? I think it's really cool.
Yeah, so the torch looks like a little flashlight. It
Mhm.
basically is, but with specific wavelengths, the red, the blue, the near infrared, and the ability to pulse. So again, we go back to, can we just target some of the systemic parts of the body, the blood, the thyroid, the lymph? Absolutely. We can also use it for acupuncture points, so known as photopuncture, where they've done some really good research on using light um, to activate certain aspects of the body. So they can be using the bladder meridians to help put someone into a parasympathetic. It can be used on one research where they used strictly blue on heart 7 and saw an improvement in cognitive function. Um, so I mean that's a whole different world of light, but very, very cool. So it can be used for that, and it can be used for smaller things. So let's say if I got a knee pain, that torch fits perfectly around the patella.
Hmm.
Where a panel like behind me, I'd have to move that from the front to the side, to the side, to the back to get the lymph node. A torch is very accessible to put right in those areas. Also, it allows me to put pressure. So if I had a shoulder issue, if I have like your panel, or if I had like a pad system,
Hmm.
unlike that, the torch, I can actually put pressure on. I can blanch the blood, which absorbs a lot of light, so that light can go deeper in, and I can move a lot of tissue out of the way, particularly like adipose fat tissue out of the way, so I can get that light deeper into that area where I really need it. So that's where
Wow.
it can also, so
Yeah.
Again, we
What
talk.
about up the nose and like in the ears? Why,
Sure,
like, what
stick
would
it.
someone want to do? Because I know that there's
Yeah.
like a little attachment. And so why would someone want to put it up their nose or in their ears?
So yeah, it's an intraoral tip. So
Oh,
it's meant
yeah, oral too.
it's meant for. So if you had sore throat, if you
Mm-hmm.
had tonsillitis, if you had any kind of inflammation in intraorally, you can
Mm-hmm.
easily reach that area with a smaller, thinner tip. But that
Okay.
same tip can easily go into the ear. So
Mm-hmm.
when we're dealing with people dealing with
Tinnitus.
tinnitus, right,
Yes.
or just general inflammation in that area, it can be beneficial. Up the nose, for sinusitis type issues, or they, just getting light up into this area feeds the blood supply, which then travels to the brain. So they have specific devices that you kind of clip in
Yeah.
that use pulsed red light to irradiate the blood supply. That feeds the brain, and that's showing positive effects on brain health. So yeah,
Very
that little
cool.
tip just allows you
Yeah.
access to other areas that you may not be able to access just with the torch by itself.
Cool. So I was exposed to a lot of mold when I lived in Florida for 15 years. And I have this thing called Marcons. It's like a colonization of antibiotic resistant bacteria in my nose. It's very hard to get rid of. And so I was thinking, should I use the blue as well? So like the red, infrared, and blue up there, because isn't
Mhm.
the blue a little bit more antimicrobial or no?
Yeah, it is, but unfortunately with blue, it's very superficial.
Okay.
So it's penetrating the top layer of the epidermis.
Uh-huh.
So for that reason, it's great for like acne. It's good for
Okay.
um, cuts and scrapes. It's great for pets
Mm-hmm.
that have, maybe they got into a fight, they got a dog bite, or they got caught up
Mm-hmm.
in some wire. It's great for stuff like that. But if
Okay.
I've got an infection deeper, that blue is not going to
It's not
have
gonna
that.
reach.
It's not going to have that same effect. The red and the near infrared certainly will,
Mhm.
because that's going to, one, penetrate further, but that's going to have all the positive systemic effects. That's going to help the
Okay.
body start to reduce the toxicities.
Okay. What about the blue for something like a dental cavity?
Yeah, that's a tough one. They're doing more research on that.
Okay.
I'm not ready.
To say yes.
I'm not. I
I appreciate
it's,
that.
and it's a tough one because so much of it has to do with, like, how far is that decay through the enamel? Is it into the dentin part yet? Is it this? That? There's so many variables involved, and there's so many different types of pathogens, bacteria, things that are causing the issues that I'm not quite ready to say, yeah, let's put light on there. But certainly, if we're dealing with type gum type issues, periodontitis,
Mhm.
gingivitis, we can certainly use the light to help benefit, to get increased circulation. If we had just had a tooth extracted, absolutely, let's put light on it. We just had a root canal, absolutely, let's just put light on it. But yeah, I'm gonna hold off on the DK part of it.
I yeah. That's
But
okay. I
uh
appreciate your honesty. Like I don't
yeah,
need every answer to be yes. I just
yeah,
yeah, that's
I
awesome.
I think what they're gonna come down to is it, working with something else. So it may be some type of a dye that you put on. No different than when we get benefits with methylene blue,
Yeah.
is accelerated. The benefits is accelerated with the use of light, whether that's IV, intraoral, placing it right on the skin as well. So I think that's where they're gonna start getting into decay issues.
Cool, cool. Well, I can't wait to see where the research goes because it's already so robust and so promising and so exciting. Um, I noticed that it feels like you're charging up like you're a battery and you're drained and you stand in front of that light panel for 10-15 minutes and you feel charged. You feel more it just it makes you feel good. Like you know how standing in the sun like it makes you feel good. That's the same kind of some similar benefits I get to being with my panel and then just I've noticed, if there's inflammation in an area, it's definitely helped with that. And you mentioned edema, and I have a foot that my left foot I had a yoga injury in 2009, and my foot has stayed in like with edema. And so I'm going to start regularly trying to do it on like do the red light therapy on my foot. So
But
hopefully it'll do it. Well,
don't forget back of the knee for the lymph node,
back of the knee. Yeah.
and the groin, and the groin area in the front for the lymph node there as well.
Okay.
So again, same thing with my kind of my neuropathy. It wasn't
Yes.
really the foot that was the issue.
Okay.
It was the spine. It was the nerves that were missignaling.
Okay. I appreciate that reminder. That's great. That's great information. So, Scott, thank you so much for all this information. It was really, really helpful. And I feel even more excited to use my red light therapy panels now, knowing all these extra benefits. And so, where can we learn more? I believe you have a great YouTube channel. And where can people get these devices?
So the website is lightpathled.com. The YouTube channel is also LightpathLED, and I have whether it's demos on the products or I've got 7 chapters on for the beginner that just wants to get their toe wet into light to understand it better without dealing with all the marketing BS that's out there or trying to read crazy research articles. So I'm just simplifying it for someone who's got 90 minutes just to learn the basics of light, what devices are out there before they go and spend, lots of money on a device that may not be appropriate for them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Scott. We'll link to everything in the show notes. And thanks for taking the time to be here today.
Thanks for having me.